Well, Elon Musk is now the richest person on the planet.
More than half the satellites in space are owned and controlled by one man.
Well, he's a legitimate super genius. I mean, legitimate.
He says he's always voted for Democrats, but this year it will be different. He'll vote Republican.
There is a reason the U.S. government is so reliant on him.
Elon Musk is a scam artist, and he's done nothing.
Anything he does is fascinating to people.
Hi, everybody. Max Shafkin here with another episode of Elon Inc. We have something special for you today. It is an interview with Kurt Wagner. Kurt is a social media reporter at Bloomberg. You heard him on this podcast before, and he has a new book. It's called Battle for the Bird, Jack Dorsey, Elon Musk, and the $44 billion fight for Twitter's soul. Kurt is one of my favorite writers at Bloomberg, and he really is the go-to journalist on this topic. And I think it's going to be really great to just go deep on this one specific part of Elon Musk's empire. I've sort of imagined this conversation in three parts. The first part is going to be essentially the man crush that set this whole thing off. The second part is going to be, we're going to get conspiratorial. We're going to talk about why this happened, and there's some really kind of crazy things. And the last part is going to be some really smart analysis on where this is going. Kurt is here with me now. Kurt Wagner, welcome to Elon Inc.
Hi, Max. I am thrilled to be here. Thanks for doing this. It's fun.
It's nice to see you. Okay, so the book, is in large part focused on this relationship between Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter. But before we get there, I just want to talk about why it matters. Like we sort of spent a lot of time in this podcast and outside in the media, you see a lot of people sort of making fun of the ways that Twitter has kind of gone downhill. But why does this site still matter? Why is it important in your mind?
I think when Twitter was at its best, it was the go-to place for literally all breaking news, right? Like if something happens on the streets of New York, the first thing you do literally is pull out Twitter and try and figure out what's going on right here. And that ultimately attracted every journalist in the world, essentially. It attracted celebrities, it attracted politicians. And even though we've seen Twitter change under Elon, I think that a lot of the kernels of that are still the case, right? And Twitter is a place where news sort of happens. It's one of the rare places online where literally if someone tweets something, it becomes a global headline. And we saw that very clearly for 4 straight years with President Donald Trump, as you remember. So I just feel this service is unique in that way, and that it's a newsmaker's service. And even under Elon, I feel that still happens, quite a bit.
You talked about just this thing being where the news happens. It's not quite that anymore, right? It's something it's like that, but more right wing. It's like that, but with Alex Jones. How do you see that evolution?
The biggest change for me has been the lack of Twitter was a quick way to get the news, and now I feel it's not quick anymore because you don't really know who anybody is, right? Before, with the verification system, you could open it up. You'd immediately see okay, these people, these blue check people are talking in my feed. And I can sort of believe with some level of confidence, these are people who I, at the very least, might want to hear from, right? They're real people. They probably have a position of some authority. And that has changed, right? Basically, if you have $8, you're a blue check person now. And so when you open the feed in a breaking news environment and you're surrounded by all these blue checks who are spouting off, you have no idea who they are. You have to pause and do your own research. And so for me, the biggest difference is it is not nearly as reliable as a news service as it was 2 years ago. And considering that was what Twitter was best at, that was the thing that Twitter was, that's a huge problem.
So Twitter's founder, I guess co-founder, Jack Dorsey, he was running the company at the time this all went down.
Yeah.
One reason I think this book is really interesting and relevant to this podcast is because it in certain ways it's a story of, it's just partly the story of Jack's sort of obsession, relationship with Elon Musk, and also the way maybe all of us put things on this person named Elon Musk. And I just want to let's just talk about how did when did he get so into Elon? When did he become when did Elon become a source of interest to Jack Dorsey, famous Silicon Valley entrepreneur?
I'm not sure if I could pinpoint the moment the admiration kicked in, but we know that it was several years before Elon took over, because Jack used to refer to Elon as his favorite tweeter quite regularly, right? There's several interviews where people would say, who do you love to follow? And he'd be like, Elon Musk. He really pushes the envelope, right? And it's like one way of describing, getting yourself into legal disputes with the SEC. But like, I think that...
But wait, what is it about those tweets, though?
I think he thought that Elon, was unfiltered, right? And I think if you ask Jack, you've heard him perhaps talk about Twitter as this global consciousness, right? Like Twitter is the global consciousness. It's the collective way that people think. And for Elon, it was a very unfiltered thought process, as we've learned. It's just sort of like what comes into his brain shows up on his Twitter feed. And to Jack Dorsey, I think he wished that everyone would be that free with their thoughts on Twitter. And so he saw Elon as sort of this famous example of what he wanted everyone else to be doing on Twitter.
Yeah, it's weird. It's funny how there are certain people, Elon Musk being one of them, who are just intuitively understand this thing and maybe understand the nature of celebrity in 2024 or whatever.
Right.
So you talk about this kind of Jack is on this quest, essentially. He's still running the company, but he's got this Elon specific quest, which is essentially what? To get Elon to show up and give a talk to the company, right?
Yeah. So this happens first in 2018. He tries to get Elon to come to what's called One Team, which was Twitter's company-wide offsite. And at the last minute, Elon bails because he's literally sleeping on the factory floor building, I believe it's the Tesla 3 at the time, the Model 3. So he doesn't show up, and everyone's like, oh, bummer, would have loved to hear from Elon. Now, fast forward 2 years, it's 2020, and Jack does get him to show up. He shows up on FaceTime in front of the whole company. And it's this really interesting exchange. Imagine 5,000 employees sitting in this convention hall. They're looking up at the stage. Jack Dorsey's standing up there, literally holding his iPad. And on the screen, he is FaceTiming with Elon Musk, who shows up in his Occupy Mars t-shirt. I believe he's at SpaceX's facility. And they have this conversation. And Jack, you can tell, is he very much likes Elon and he wants to flatter Elon. And he makes some joke about, hey, would you love to run the company someday? Ha ha ha. And everyone sort of chuckles. And Elon spends his brief moment in front of the whole company just complaining about bots. And he's like, yeah, how do you know who's what's a botnet versus what isn't? Are these short sellers or are these real people? Blah, blah, blah. And he complains and about bots. And then Jack Dorsey ends the thing and he's like, we love you. We love what you're doing. And it ends, right? And in the moment, it's okay, if you're a Twitter employee, maybe that's kind of fun.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, but it's a movie level, foreshadowing, right? Because you fast forward 2 years and it's Jack was hey, do you want to run the company? Guess what he's asking Elon? Hey, do you want to run the company? What's Elon complaining about? He's complaining about bots, right? These things came back around, which is one of the reasons I put it in the book. I just thought it was such a remarkable scene 2 years ahead of the acquisition.
All right, so let's move on to the takeover, which it's just so weird in retrospect. I want to walk through this acquisition and talk about, kind of what you learned in reporting the book. But I think just to kind of set the scene here, I want to take everyone back to April 2022, the TED conference. Elon Musk, innovator, world's richest man, is asked, what he's doing. And this is what he says.
So, Elon, a few hours ago, you made an offer to buy Twitter. Why?
How'd you know?
Little bird tweeted in my ear or something. I don't know.
By the way, have you seen the movie Ted about the bear?
I have.
It's a good movie.
Why make that offer?
Oh, so, well, I think it's very important for there to be an inclusive arena for free speech, where all, Twitter has become kind of the de facto town square. It's just really important that people have both the reality and the perception that they are able to speak freely within the bounds of the law.
So, yeah, super interesting, totally very mature, totally normal. This is great timing, right, Kurt? Elon Musk, he's a genius. He's got an intuitive sense of business timing, right? This was perfect. April 2022 for this moment.
If you're going to overpay for a social network, April 2022 was the best time to ever do that. No, his timing, of course, as we know now, was disastrous, right? I mean, like, he comes in, he essentially forces the board into this deal, right? He gives them this incredible offer. What he may or may not know behind the scenes is, like, the company has set these very lofty targets around user growth and revenue that they're not coming close to hitting. They're thinking about doing a second or a very large round of layoffs. Like, the business is not in a good shape. And here comes Elon, the white knight, like, completely overpaying for Twitter. And so the board jumps at this, right? And they're like, wow, this is an incredible, like, exit for this company that's kind of solves a bunch of these problems that we're predicting or preparing to deal with. And then shortly after that, inflation goes through the roof, and there's a war going on in Europe that starts to spook a bunch of people and spook sort of just the financial markets globally. And his own net worth takes this huge hit. Like, within weeks, we're talking tens of billions of dollars of Elon's own net worth that are just disappearing. And so you fast forward, you start kind of mid-April, and you fast forward 1 month, and his whole mindset around this acquisition is already changing because he's now locked into this really overpriced thing, and he's realizing, my timing was absolutely terrible.
Maybe that weed joke acquisition price was not as funny as I thought it was at the time.
$54.20. Didn't let past a lot of people.
All right. So one of the things, again, this was like, it's sort of hard to overstate. I mean, Elon stands, and even those of us who cover it have gotten used to the idea that this happened. It was sort of like hard to imagine why this happened. Why does this guy who has basically dedicated his life by his own account to, making humanity a multiplanetary species, to saving the Earth from global warming, like, why does he suddenly start worrying about, is Twitter going to ban Scott Adams or something? Or like is cat turd being demonetized? Anyway, he gets really into this. And the book offers a variety of theories, and they're all so fun. So I just want to sort of go through a couple of them with you right now. Starting with, I think, what is like the Elon Musk official version of the story, which is essentially he had too much money in his bank account and he needs somewhere to put it.
That's right. This is the theory that was sort of outlined in Walter Isaacson's recent book about Elon Musk, was that he, like all of us rich guys are, Max, you and I know, when you just have too much money, we got to go spend it on something frivolous, right? And so this would be the equivalent of maybe a less rich person going and buying like a vacation home or a yacht or something. But for Elon, it was Twitter, right? And so this is what Walter sort of says in his book, is that he just didn't want his money to sit in a bank account. He wanted to do something with it. And Twitter was like his favorite thing to use. And so that became the target for him.
Yeah, and I guess it's also that he really liked it. Like, it's sort of related to the Jack Dorsey thing. Like, hey, this is like my favorite, way to spend my time. So do what you love, as they say.
Yeah, I think this for him was like a personal, like, favorite product that he very much loved to use. And so the idea of owning it, I guess, sounded really cool when you have more money than you know what to do with.
And the next one I want to talk about is this text message that he gets from Tallulah Riley, who is his 2 times ex-wife. Elon does everything bigger than most people, so they've actually been married and divorced twice. And she sort of makes a suggestion to him with respect to Twitter.
Yeah, she does. So the super quick backstory here is that Twitter had suspended account from the Babylon Bee, which is like a satire site, I guess, that was making jokes about trans people, quite frankly. And, they're off-color jokes that not a lot of people find very funny, but there are people who do. And Tallulah Riley, I guess, is one of those people. And she was upset that the account had been suspended. And so she texts her ex-husband and says, and I'm looking at this now, she says, "Can you buy Twitter and then delete it, please? America is going insane." And then a few minutes later, she goes, "Or can you buy Twitter and make it radically free speech?"
To be fair, we've all had that thought.
Twitter, we all want Elon to buy Twitter, or our ex-spouses to buy Twitter. But, here she is basically saying, "Can you buy this and make it radically free speech?" And a few minutes after that, Elon texts back and says, "Maybe buy it and change it to properly support free speech." Now, you'd think this is maybe just the kind of like fun banter between two people who used to have a relationship. But, in the world of Elon, this leads to like less than 24 hours, him tweeting to all of his followers saying like, does there need to be a new platform? And when people say yes, then a day after that, it's, well, now he's suddenly going to buy shares and try and join the board of Twitter, right? And so you can see how this one like kernel of a conversation perhaps led Elon down this path towards, wanting to turn Twitter into this free speech place. And it all maybe starts with like the Babylon Bee, which I find to be quite interesting and sort of hilarious.
Yeah, there's a whole interesting kind of side alley we could go down around Elon and comedy. The Babylon Bee is kind of a competitor to The Onion. He at one point had tried to take over The Onion. He got worried it was too woke. And so it does seem like somewhat plausible that he could have been feeling very sympathetic to the Babylon Bee and wanted to commit this $44 billion act to resolve it. I want to come back to the suggestion that he was trying to kill Twitter in a second. But before we get there, the third theory is that Elon Musk bought Twitter, and this is new. This is breaking news, folks. This is in Kurt's book that he did this because. Now I'm reading a little bit into Kurt's book here, but what Kurt's book reports is that before buying Twitter, Elon Musk was sending complaints privately to Jack Dorsey and Parag Agrawal. We talked about one of those complaints just now, but also complaining about this Twitter account that's following his plane.
Yeah, so at ElonJet, you may be familiar with, if you followed the world of Elon, it's literally an account that tracks the whereabouts of his private plane, when it takes off, when it lands, where it takes off, where it lands. And Elon was very unhappy with this for, I guess, obvious reasons. He didn't like the idea of his location being out there publicly. And so he complained to Parag in January of 2022, asking for the account to be removed. And Parag essentially ignored him, right? Or certainly didn't take his complaints and do anything with it. And so what was interesting about that timing is that at the very end of January 2022 was when Elon Musk started buying shares of Twitter. And you could imagine, and I don't think this is that huge of a stretch, that, he wants this account removed. They're not doing it for him. What could you do if you had more money than you knew what to do with? Well, you could become a shareholder in that company and try and use your position as a shareholder to sort of pressure them to take this account down or whatever. And there are people involved in the deal that I've spoken to who believed that this was a real motivation for him. Now, whether he intended for it to snowball in the way that it did, I don't know. But there are people who definitely thought ElonJet was sort of the genesis of this stock purchase that he started to do.
Well, I do think it's believable because, as we know, later on he takes action, right? He bans the creator of ElonJet for a time, and in fact bans anyone who speaks of ElonJet. If you link to outside instances of this account, you would also get banned, and including he banned a New York Times journalist. So it's clear this was a fixation.
Yeah, he did. And he created an entire new policy at Twitter on a whim about like doxing someone's real-time location and how ElonJet basically violated that policy. And now ElonJet does exist, but it's like a 24-hour delay. So basically you can find out where Elon flew yesterday versus like where Elon is flying right now. So this became a thing that he changed and took action on once he took over. So to your point, Max, I do think it's not that crazy of an idea that this all started with the ElonJet account.
All right. Well, I want to fly the business jet that is this podcast to talk about the actual process of reporting this book. You've been covering Twitter for how long? I mean, like 15 years? How long has it been, Kurt?
Yeah, 11 or 12 years. Yeah, it's been a very long time.
You have all of these sources, I'm thinking. Like, how did they process all this craziness that's happening? Like, world's richest man is like going to take over their company and save Western civilization or something in the process.
I think when Elon first showed up, there was actually this feeling that, this is cool. This is good. The richest man in the world who has more money than he knows what to do with could do anything he wants. And what he wants to do is work on Twitter. And to a lot of people who worked there, that was sort of encouraging and at the very least validating to what they were doing and building. I think it didn't take very long for them to realize that Elon was not a good cultural fit for what Twitter had built, and that his management style was so unpredictable and so at odds with what they were used to that it was not really the vibe that they were hoping. I think if Elon had stayed as a board member and just simply like maybe advised, I think people would have been actually pretty excited about that. But I think the takeover itself went sideways quite quickly.
So what was the breaking point?
So there was a meeting in June of 2022. So quick on the timeline, Elon Musk arrives in late March, early April. He's acquired the company on paper by the end of April. He starts to sort of badmouth the company shortly after that. You know, we talked about how he realized his timing was terrible. He's sort of like getting cold feet about this deal. But there was still this like all employee Q&A that had been scheduled with Elon for mid-June, right? And so at this point, Elon is still supposed to be buying the company. These are people who are sitting down and thinking they're hearing from their future boss, right? And so there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of anticipation, and he shows up late. He shows up sort of a little disheveled. His like
This is an in-person meeting.
This is on video because everyone is still basically working remotely at this point. But he shows up late. He shows up like his collar is like splayed open. His hair is sort of like messed up. There's like some random guy that no one knows who it is who's like working in the background behind him, and it goes terribly, quite frankly. Like he rambles for like 8 or 9 minutes at the very beginning.
Kurt, by the way, we have a clip to play, I think, of this meeting. Let's listen to it quickly.
I mean, right now the costs exceed the revenue, so that's not a great situation to be in. And so there would have to be some rationalization of headcount and expenses to have revenue be greater than cost. Otherwise, Twitter is simply not viable, or can't grow. But like I said, anyone who's like obviously like a significant contributor should have nothing to worry about.
Wait, so Kurt, where did this come from, by the way? This audio that we just heard?
Yeah, this was from a source of mine who was at the company at the time who shared it. So there were a lot of journalists pretty tuned into this meeting, as you can imagine. At the time, there were a lot of employees that were happy to help get this out there.
It sounds kind of brutal in some of the ways that all meetings like this are, I guess. It's not in person. There's like a weird quality. But again, reading the description of this in your book, it felt heightened. You mentioned we didn't hear it, but I guess he eventually started talking about the aliens. Is that right?
That's right. How he had never seen proof of aliens. That was mostly how the conversation ended. So that was a bit of an odd note for people who were not used to talking about aliens during work meetings.
Let's go forward a bit. And I want to talk about where this thing that is Twitter, now called X, that has, sort of how dramatically it's changed since then, and also like what it means for the business, which of course what you're covering now for Bloomberg. First of all, I just want to just like give us a little teeny taste of kind of the next beat of this story, which is, to my mind, November 2023, I think you know where this is going, Kurt, but Elon Musk doing some really great sales work from the stage of the Deal Book Conference in New York City.
If somebody's going to try to blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go f*** yourself.
Kurt, how does Twitter make money these days?
Oh, funny that you should ask, Max. They actually make money from advertisers and, the people who Elon was speaking to when he was on stage at DealBook.
Do you think, though, there's any chance that in the same way that like with cable news, for many and TV news, right? For many years, there was kind of like one style of TV news was very objective, and then with the advent of cable, it bifurcated or eventually bifurcated, where you had like kind of like left-wing networks and right-wing networks. I mean, do you think that could happen with social media? I mean, that has been like kind of the bet of a bunch of entrepreneurs, none of whom have done it very well, but also none of whom are Elon Musk. Like, is there like a multi-billion-dollar right-wing social network? Is that possible?
I'm not super confident that that's possible, only because I feel like we've seen, a version of that with Truth Social, right? Like if Donald Trump can't necessarily make a purely like conservative right-wing social network work at scale, then I don't know why Twitter and Elon would necessarily be able to do that. I think it's very possible that there's several of these networks that show up. Like, I can speak anecdotally, like if I go to Threads, which is the new sort of like Twitter clone that Meta owns, and you talk like negatively about Elon over there, your engagement's great. Like, if you want to go get followers on Threads, just go over there and talk about how much you hate Elon Musk, and you're probably going to be a very popular person. So, you know, you could see where these things start to diverge, and like there's networks for differing beliefs or differing viewpoints, but it's hard to imagine them getting to the scale that you would need for this to become like a massive thing the way that Twitter was.
So what do you think is the most, Elon likes to say that, what does he like to say? The most likely outcome is the funniest outcome? Or what do you think is the most likely outcome for this story, for the sort of Elon Musk Twitter story?
Until very recently, I actually thought the most likely outcome was going to be bankruptcy, quite frankly, because I thought that this company was losing money quite consistently, and I didn't know if Elon had the patience or stomach to just continually pay out of pocket for this thing to keep operating. Now, I kind of have started to subscribe to this XAI idea, which is like, if he can figure out a way to use the data associated with Twitter to make money with something that's not Twitter, it really takes the pressure off of, you know, the advertising business, which they clearly aren't doing well. So I kind of feel like it's going to continue to exist, because it's hard for me to imagine Elon admitting defeat, right? Saying, hey, I thought I could do this thing, but look, I ran it into the ground, does not strike me as something that we're ever going to hear him admit to or say. And so then you say, okay, well, what's the other alternative? It's that it gets subsumed by something else. And I think Tesla is not going to take over Twitter. SpaceX certainly isn't, but an AI company, if this is a real thing, maybe it would be a logical, you know, product within that.
Do you feel like Twitter, this thing that has some kind of specialness to it in terms of like you said, like we talked about at the beginning, this sort of like a heartbeat of the world's information. It's like what is happening right now. It really, even if you can criticize it and still feel like this thing is important and special, it'd be sad if it goes away. Does that feel like a tragedy to you if Twitter becomes just like a way to train bots? Have we lost something here in during this period? And is there any hope of reclaiming or at least preserving some of what is actually really good about this thing today?
I do think it's sad, and I think that Twitter at its best was one of the most entertaining places you could go on the internet. And actually, I think I would have said that this is completely gone, except for, I don't know if you were on Twitter, or I keep calling it Twitter, or maybe I should call it X. I was on X during the Super Bowl, and I actually kind of got a glimpse of like what old Twitter used to be like. Like, being on X during the Super Bowl was fun for me, and maybe those moments will crop up.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like, on one hand, I'm sad. It's like we're like a junkie, and like we're getting this like really cut down version of the old high, and we're still into it. On the other hand, I think you're right. There is just something. You can criticize social media and feel like it's bad, and it can be a vehicle for all sorts, the aggrandizement of billionaires, but it does have a magic to it, and I think that's maybe a good place to leave things. Kurt Wagner, thank you so much for being here on Elon Inc. Battle for the Bird is out now. You can read an excerpt at Bloomberg.com. You should also go buy the book from your local bookseller. Kurt, thank you for being here, and looking forward to seeing you next time as a panelist on this show.
This was awesome, Max. Thank you so much. I love chatting with you and getting the chance to talk about the book. So thank you very much.
Okay, let's end it there. Thanks for listening to Elon Inc. and thanks to Kurt Wagner. Once again, the book is called Battle for the Bird, and it's on sale now. This episode was produced by Stacey Wong. Naomi Shavin and Rehan Harmansi are our senior editors. The idea for this very show also came from Rehan. Blake Maples handles engineering, and we get special editing assistance from Jeff Grocott. Our supervising producer is Magnus Hendrickson, and thank you, as always, to Joel Weber. The Elon Inc. theme is written and performed by Taka Yasuzawa and Alex Seguiera. Sage Bauman is the head of Bloomberg Podcasts and our executive producer. I'm Max Chafkin. If you have a minute, rate and review this show. They'll help new listeners find us, and we will really appreciate it. And we will see you next week.